Like the rest of us, you're a time jumper, Mr. Collins. 1 second our lives were normal, and then a flash of lightning. The next second, well, that's when things get real interesting.
Don't let me shoot you, boy! Welcome to 1956.
Listen to me. We're going to get home. All of us.
It had my attention from the first word. It's a series of books. That's a video tease for the series of books that are basically called Back to Normal. And yeah, we're talking about Normal, Illinois. And with us on the phone right now, and I can't wait to hear the story how this all developed, is the guy who's authored 4 of these books. His name is Randy McWilson. Hi, Randy.
Absolutely. Afternoon to you, Dan Swaney, and I'm glad to be talking with you about Back to Normal.
Okay, well, let's get the first question out of the way. Have you been to Normal before?
Absolutely. You know, when I was working on this series, I actually spent time in the wonderful communities of both Bloomington and Normal, interviewed people. The book series is set in the mid-1950s, and the majority of the book series, and actually spent time with people who grew up there in the 50s, interviewed them. I read yearbooks that were signed in the 50s. I watched films of Bloomington Normal from the 50s to see how people dressed, how they interacted with each other, and went to the library, went to the archive center, and took hundreds of photos from all over town because I wanted this series to be as realistic and as rooted in reality as possible so the reader was never pulled out of the mystery and intrigue of time travel by some slip or faux pas in the actual narrative. And so absolutely love the area.
Good for you for doing research like that, because a lot of people would have just looked on the map and said, oh, Normal, that's a cool name for a town. I'll just go ahead and start using it without having ever come here. But tell us how the series begins, because there are a lot of references to the town of Normal and things like that. Obviously, it's a centerpiece of the books, but tell us how this all began, because if you are a sci-fi person and you live in Bloomington Normal, you have to do these books, folks. I'm telling you. Randy, how's the story begin?
Well, would it be too cliche to say let's travel back in time?
You know, I could have gotten some back in time music out. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's right. We needed maybe some Rod Serling, you know.
Yeah.
But if we go back to January of 2011, I was doing some video production. I'm a media producer, and I do television and filmmaking, and I teach media. And I was heading to a shoot and had hired a guy to help me with lighting. And as we were driving, I was telling him about some movie scripts that I've been working on. And he said, you know, I had a dream the other day that I think would make a good kind of a seed bed, or at least a bit of an inspiration for a movie. And I said, well, we've got a few hours on the road. Let me hear it. And he said, well, I dreamed about a guy from our time who fell asleep on the couch, and he woke up in a motel, and it was the early 1950s, and he had no idea how he got there, and the first person that he met was a cop. And he goes, and then I woke up. And so I said, well, really what you've given me is a basic time period, the 50s, the early Cold War. And I said, you've given me the idea of time travel and that there's a policeman. But, you know, that's just a little bit of a seed of an idea. So I said, let's develop that. And so in the next, we had 3 hours down, 3 hours back driving. We developed this entire concept, and I let him kind of in on my creative process of how I think about stories and develop stories. And before the day was out, had really a basic framework for the whole concept that what if there was a group of people living from different decades, so the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, 90s up until our time, we're all living in the town of Normal, Illinois, not 100% sure how they got there, and they're trying to get back to when they came from. Notice I didn't say where they came from.
Yeah.
To when they came from, and what if some influential members of the community, such as the police chief, was also a time traveler? And so in the midst of all this, you have the CIA has become aware that somewhere in America there is a group of people, a pocket of people that are from the future that are trying to stay under the radar for some reason. And then the KGB becomes aware that the CIA becomes aware of this group of people. And so it's this international geopolitical race to see who can capture this group of people from the future before they can get away because of what that would be worth to the intelligence community. It's a thriller. It's an intellectual thriller. It's a historical thriller, and it's an emotional thriller because my goal in the series was to make the reader wonder, what would it be like if 1 second I'm playing catch with my son in the front yard, there's a flash of lightning, and the next moment I'm in a field in the Midwest, and I have no idea how I got there, and then I discover I'm 60 years in the past. What would that be like emotionally? And then what steps would a person go through? Denial. And so through the main character, Denver Wayne Collins, he experiences all the steps that we would all go through to try to believe that this is not real. And then he discovers these other people, and then it is just a roller coaster of geopolitical intrigue until they can try to find out, is it possible to get back to when they came from.
It's an incredible concept that you developed very well, and you've gotten 4 books out of it already. Will people from Bloomington Normal recognize any of the places or the scenery that you have developed in these books?
It is so gratifying when I check Amazon and I see reviews from readers and that are giving their ratings and reviews. How many times you read someone say, I grew up in Bloomington Normal, I went to school in Normal, and this book took me right back to my childhood. This book series was, there was, the Normal Theater. As you guys know, Steak and Shake was born in Normal, and the Steak and Shake gets some prominent mention actually all through the series, and different street names and the university and different locations are all completely accurate in Bloomington Normal, and people have applauded me for putting that much detail into it, because like you said, you could have just picked an interesting sounding city and then made the rest of it up. But I wanted as much of it to be absolutely rooted in history so that if someone really was from that area, the believability factor, nothing would ever pull them out of the story as an obvious or glaring error. And, the feedback that I'm getting from people, as a matter of fact, just today I got an email from a librarian in Normal that said she is hooked on the story and that she found out about it through some readers who came in the library and asked her about it and said their whole family was hooked on the series and that it should be in their library. And so people from that area are really, really connecting with this story in exactly the way that I wanted them to.
Yeah, Randy McWilson's on the phone with us. He's the man who has authored the Back to Normal series of books, and there are 4 of them. And Randy, with people who maybe aren't sci-fi people, would it be fair to say, even if you're from Bloomington Normal, that's going to help you get into this book and then just kind of let it take you wherever it goes rather than trying to understand everything that's going on? Because people try too hard to understand sci-fi sometimes.
There are so many reviews online that I read from people that say, it always begins with, I am not a sci-fi reader, and then there's a comma, and then there's a big but, But a friend of mine encouraged me to read this series, and you ought to read all the people that say, look, I read romance, or, I read young adult fantasy, and I don't really read sci-fi. But this series, I was hooked, hook, line, and sinker. And so I get emails, I get messages, I get contacted on Facebook from people that say, I don't read sci-fi. In fact, I had a lady the other day tell me, said she had never read a sci-fi book in her life, and she recently just finished the 4-book series and says she just could not put any of it down because even though it is about time travel is the background, but it's only the impetus to get us into the story. In other words, time travel is not every single book. It's not completely sci-fi. That's just the glue that holds the whole story together, but it's really about these people and what would it be like if you were thrown back 60 years ago and you were trying to live your life pretending that you were from the 50s, but really you were from 1995 or 2015, and you were trying to stay below the radar, all the while you're doing research of how to get back to when you came from. So don't let, the title that it's a science fiction thriller, hold you back. It's really an emotional thriller about this group of people that would have never been friends in the real world. I always tell people it's a little bit like the TV show Lost. None of those people would have really been friends in the real world when you watch that TV show, but they were thrown together in that extraordinary incident, and they had to survive together. And so it's kind of like going to the zoo. You're behind you're watching those animals on the other side of the glass. And in this book series, you're on the other side of the glass in your living room looking through the glass at these people that are being put through these incredibly uncomfortable situations, trying to get along trying to survive in the world of the 50s, but they're completely out of their element, and they're being hunted by the CIA and the KGB. And the story covers the Roswell incident. It goes to Area 51. It covers all the conspiracy theorist delights like MK Ultra and the Philadelphia experiment and Paperclip and all of those things that just absolutely make people's websites, just go crazy with conspiracy theories and what-if scenarios. All of that is woven together into what if all of these things were really about time travel, not necessarily about an arms race or a space race. What if it was really the U.S. and the Soviet Union were engaged in a time race, and these people were at the center of that race?
I'm with you on this. Back to Normal has 4 books. Are there more books to come yet?
Well, that's a great question. There is a second series that is in the works. That second series is tentatively titled The Iron Protocol, and it's tentatively going to take place during World War II. A lot of your favorite main characters are coming back. I've got to be careful what I say because there were some it would be huge spoilers if you knew which characters survived, because there is quite a bit of characters that do not make it to the end of the series, and I've had people say that the 4th book shocked them like no other book they've ever read. And so there is a second book series, but I'm also, in the meantime, working on a new series about dragons, and the first book of that series should be out end of September.
You're a busy guy, man. You just keep pumping stuff out. Back to Normal, I have to ask. Are you pitching it to TV or movies? Are people interested in picking this up to do television or a movie about this?
That's a fantastic question. Actually, the book series started out as a television series. That's my background, television and film. So when I first wrote this, I wrote 3 episodes. I wrote a pilot episode and 2 one-hour episodes, and started pitching this in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. I got the attention of actually Al Pacino's former manager, who a friend of his had read my works, had convinced him to read it. He called me 4 times on the phone before I returned his call, and he called and said that of all the thousands of scripts he'd ever read in Hollywood in 50 years, it was one of the best ideas he'd ever read. And so he signed me on, and he's been promoting it as a potential new series. Nothing's happened yet, but that doesn't, discourage me as a writer. I'm moving forward because people that read this series, the emails and messages I get on a daily basis, encourage me to keep moving forward. It is finding an audience. People, they say that this is the first time they read time travel that made them feel that it's actually real, that it's actually possible. I had a lady the other day, she told me, she said she'd finished reading the first book, and after she finished reading it, there was an electrical storm and lightning hit near her home, and as she said, she stepped out onto her porch, and the first thing that came to her mind was, I wonder if somebody just jumped through time. She said the way I described time travel and how it could be possible was so realistic that it made her believe that perhaps somebody had just jumped through time.
How about that? And you know what the series does is it incorporates all the best of things that people like about time travel, about this, the international intrigue. It has all of that in there. All the books have that, and then you just place it in a town that we're from, which is awfully cool for us here.
I purposely looked at the entire family before I wrote this. I looked at, what would the junior high and high school, what would, the college age, what would the middle agers, what would the parents and the grandparents. There's something for everyone. There's the sci-fi for the younger crowd. There's the Cold War espionage for the people that, maybe the middle agers that love the James Bond and then the older folks that love the history and maybe that love the conspiracy. And so I tried to weave into it something for everyone. And I tell you, the feedback I'm getting from people from 16 to 66 is phenomenal. I never would have believed such a wide demographic. I mean, there's not even a demographic. It's just a broad spectrum of interest. And it really is overwhelming. And people always ask me, when is Series 2 coming out? And I tell them, it's in the works. I'm in the planning stages. I probably won't start writing on it till 1st of next year, but we're looking at probably at least a trilogy for the Iron Protocol, Back to Normal Series 2.
How about that? Randy McWilson, we're awfully glad you took some time to talk to us here in Bloomington Normal today. Can't wait to get my teeth into the series so I can do it too. You've got me so interested in a book that's set in our time, but yet it's set back in time. It's a cool concept. And Randy, thanks again for taking some time with us. The next time you're up here in Bloomington Normal, I'll buy you a big double cheeseburger at Steak and Shake, okay?
That, of course, now there's Monaco's Pizza that is in the same spot where the original Steak and Shake
Yep.
was. So I'll accept either one.
Okay, we can do that. I like Monaco's too. So thank you, Randy.
And that gets mentioned, Monaco's gets mentioned in the series in the 4th book.
Okay. See, now we've got everything. You just kept us going there. And next time we get together, I want to ask about your experience with Sharknado. But we've run out of time here, so I can't do that.
We need 3 more hours.
Oh, yeah, I bet we do. You've done some really good stuff, and a lot of it I've watched. Ancient Aliens, Meteorite Men, Doomsday, American Warships. You've done some really good stuff. You've been in some good projects. So we will save that for another time, and we hope to get you back on, okay?
Thanks, Dan, so much.
You betcha. Randy McWilson is our guest, and we've talked about his series of books are called Back to Normal, set in the town of Normal in the mid-50s, and it's fascinating.